All right, y'all. So I was just coming from IHOP, and I had a thought. It's like this might be an interesting video, and it's basically it's like what is my philosophy for like building basketball teams or the way to play, and I think well before we get into that, I'll put it like this. I'm not saying this is the standard or should be the standard necessarily, but I believe the way I see teams being built or should be built is what I think personally is the best. It's just my personal opinion. So when I look at teams, I'm looking for two things, two key components. I'm looking for teams that can win games without their superstars. Now, what I'm saying, I'm not saying okay, we can go put these guys out here for an entire season and they're going to get like 50 wins. No, I'm not saying that. But the team has to be compatible or competitively viable without their superstars. Let me give you an extreme example, which is kind of contradictory to what I said to some degree. Actually, you know what? I'll give you two examples. One that's actually in line. But the contradictory kind of example is the Bulls. When Jordan retired that first time, they went out there and won like 50 plus games and got into the playoffs. Jordan was their superstar, but the team was built in a way that Jordan was not the system and they could win without him. Now, that team was a championship engine or contender when he was on the court. When he was on the court, they went to the next level. His presence was that impactful. I believe properly built teams they should rely on a superstar, but it should not be superstar dependent, if that makes sense. So basically, I'll give you my team, the Mavs. The year the Mavs won the championship, I believe Dirk went down and they went like 2 or 22 or 2 or 23. It was something ridiculous. Like they dropped all the way from the first seed to like I think they were like teetering on the eighth or not even like being in the playoffs. Then they came back and Dirk made that run. But they couldn't do anything without Dirk. And I didn't like the way that team was built. Yes, when Dirk was playing, yes, everything worked the way it was supposed to in context. But he demanded so much of the ball and centralized like the game itself. Like I didn't think that team was ran or built good enough for the long term, and it wasn't. Now a more modern recent example is the when Steph went down. It was like right around the playoffs when he had his MVP season, his unanimous MVP season. Clay and Dre were able to win games in the playoffs alone, like against Portland. Like they beat Portland without Steph. And so that team, even without the superstar, was still could work and could win games, and they were competitively viable. A lot of teams, like if we go look at like LeBron James teams, because he dominates the ball, does so much on the court by himself. When he's gone, it's like the entire engine is removed from the car, and so it can't do anything. You know, and I don't think that's the way your team should be built. I think if you're going to build a team, there needs to be a system in place and everybody has a role. Yes, essentially everybody is a role player. Some people have bigger roles than others. But to be competitively viable, all those guys need to know how to play within a system and win the game without the presence of their superstar. Now, if you're playing like okay, I'll give you an example. The Bucks, I think this year, yeah, when Giannis got hurt, they were able to win a game. Now, I'm not saying they could win a bunch of games throughout, I'm not saying they're 45, 50 win team, but they know how to play and win so that Giannis takes them to the next level. A lot of teams, once they lose their superstar, like if the Lakers lost LeBron, AD couldn't carry that team. He's just not. It's not built that way. He can't do like. It's just impossible. They just cannot win tangibly. Like LeBron literally is the only thing holding all of that together. So when we're building teams, I don't want a team who is so dependent on superstar gravity that they can't function when the superstar isn't there, because all kinds of things can happen. You could foul out, superstar get hurt or injured, um, any kind of thing. Get sick, you might miss a game, and if your team can't play without them, you don't really have a team. So that's the first thing. The second thing is when I look at teams, I like to focus on versatility. I like my team to be able to perform, play a variety of different ways and play them all effectively. I like high IQ. I like high technique basketball. I need you to effectively be able to deal with anything. If it doesn't matter what your lineup is, I should be able to have something to go to counter it. And if I can't, then I have a problem. One of the things that made the Lakers so great this year, in the playoffs in particular, is they had a lot of lineups they could go to. They could play small ball, and they put AD at the 5, and they could play LeBron at the 4, and, they can go down. Or they could play big, and they can run LeBron basically point guard, and like their smallest guys like 6'7", and they have like, AD and Dwight, which is like two like 6'11", 7 feet guys. Like that's a lot of size to deal with. They could play fast if they needed to. They could play so many different ways. So you can't out mismatch them because they have something for it. That's kind of what I see or want to see the Pels do. I want them to have so many advantages that they can deal with anything, especially because they got a huge advantage in Lonzo being like 6'7", and BI being tall. Granted, that kind of is less impactful with Zion being short, but the whole point is they should be able to play a variety of different ways. They shouldn't. So basically last year with the Pelicans, and it was a matter of roster construction. What I saw from that roster, I got tweets and posts where I said, look, they're going to get beat if they play teams with size, and they did. They got swept by those teams, Dallas, OKC, Lakers. They couldn't beat them. They just couldn't. See, and it goes back to my last video. Any team that could play small ball or had to play small, they had an advantage. But teams that had size, they had nothing for them, because there'll be times when the Pels could go pull out a lineup of 4 guards and like a forward, and they could just run teams off the floor and just like suffocate them defensively if they were small. But if you do that against a team like the Lakers, they're just going to give it a pound. They're going to pound you away. They're just going, okay, LeBron's just going to beat whoever because he's too big, too strong, too fast. And once he gets the double team or triple, it's easy to just dump off to JaVale or to AD. Like, you're going to have to come off somewhere to help, And teams like, we look at the Rockets. The Rockets played small ball, and that shit works against some teams who just aren't experiences them, or who can't, out IQ them or outshoot them. But when you get to a team that has, equal levels of talent, but they got versatility and size, well, what happens when the Lakers decided to play big? Okay, there's some mismatches there where they can exploit. But check this out. The Lakers said, fuck it. We're not going to play JaVale and Dwight this series that much. We're going to match y'all size for size. And we still going to be bigger. We're going to be bigger. We're going to be way more effective at what we do than you guys do. We're going to be able to take you out your game. Because, see, what the problem is, y'all was beating us with speed. Well, when we lower the size, but we're still bigger than you guys and we're stronger, and now you don't have the speed advantage anymore, what can you do? So Russ couldn't get a shot in because they were too big. He's simply too big. There's nothing you can do about it. And Russ is low IQ. He don't have a jumper. So it's easy to just pack paint and deal with him. James Harden didn't have to carry the workload, which he can, but the problem is James Harden's game does not space. It does not help the rest of the team the way he's playing offensively, shooting the ball. It's not getting the other teammates involved, which he can do effectively. But you got PJ Tucker trying to guard Anthony Davis, mismatch. You got PJ Tucker trying to guard LeBron, mismatch. And not just that, he's getting worn out. He's your biggest guy. You got Robert Covington out there. He can defend very well. I like Robert Covington, love him as a player, but these guys they can't defend AD. He's just too good. He's got too much, in his toolbox to deal with. And so it was like, what was your adjustment that you could make? You didn't have anybody else you could put out there, and you could okay, this is how we beat this, and you got to force them to adjust to you now. They didn't have that. So for me, when I look at teams, or when I want to build a team, I'm looking to play yes, we have that one thing that we're known for above else, but we say, okay, I see you, I'll match you this way. Look, as much as people want to talk about Golden State the last couple years, even before KD, the Golden State could match you. They could play small ball, but they could match you. They had some size on that team, or on their teams, especially in their bench depth. But when they played small, most teams in the league, and this is what made them really great for that little run that they had, most teams were not built to combat small ball. It wasn't a thing. And not just that, the players they had basically the best shooters ever to play in the game. It's hard to beat a team that has unique talent that doesn't exist, and that has a unique style of play that nobody else is accustomed to or has the pieces to defend. Which is why the Warriors are going to be good, but they're not going to beat the Lakers this year unless they get some size. And it's funny because the media heads was talking about they were looking to get some size at at centers, which is why I think they'll probably take Wiseman if they can't trade their pick. But the whole thing for me, it's it's going to come down to versatility. You got to be able to play styles and play matchups. And so for me, just looking throughout the years, let's talk about the early 2000s Lakers with Shaq and Kobe. Yes, that was your duo, and they would carry you. But there was games where Shaq fouled out, and guess what? That team still had to win. And they would change up their style a little bit, but they would lean on Kobe. You could do that, I guess, with teams with two superstars. But even with that being said, what if they couldn't adjust their style? Would they have won some of those games? Would they have won some of those titles? No. And that's what it comes down to. Good coaches recognize what they have, the pieces and the parts that they have, and they exploit what they have. Basically what you're going to run is dependent on what kind of team you have. But it also it'd be smart of you to adjust to what your opponent is doing. So if you're running small ball and it's not working against a team that's big, you might need to go big and play big for a little bit. And if you can get an edge going big, well, the other team might say, okay, we won because we got you out of your set. Now we can go and play this style. Well, then you just back and play you beat them up and play small. And you got to follow, it's a game of ebb and flow. Smart coaches will make the adjustments on the fly to counter the teams. But look at the Pels from this previous year with Alvin Gentry. When you got Frank Jackson, Etuan Moore, Josh Hart, and J.J. Redick, and say Jahlil Okafor on the floor at the same time, you're missing way too much. And there's so many places that teams can take advantage of you. Your lineups, your rotations, it's not effective. That's why I believe in clamoring for center help, for help and depth at forward. If you sit here and you can't match up with these things, okay, I'll give you an example. When Zion first played the Mavs, they had Maxi Kleber and KP, guys who are 7 feet tall, and he's got to try to jump those guys in the paint, playing small ball 5 or small ball 4. He can't do it. there's just a certain point where genetics, where the genetic lottery just takes over. And yes, you can have all the talent in the world at times, but sometimes size, be it big or small, no homo, is too much to overcome. It just is. And so that was one of his worst shooting performances, in his short career. But what if the Pels had some of these guys that they could play variety of styles against? What if you could still play fast, but you had some bigs that could put pressure and block shots and, deter AD and LeBron from attacking the rim? Now you got a chance. Now you can play your game, you can still win. Now your BIs can go off and Zoe can facilitate and get Zion where he needs to be. He can go off. But when you can't, it makes it so much harder on your team. And so for me, as a person, as if I was a coach, or as I like to see teams build, I want that versatility. I don't want to be put in situations where I sit there and say we just don't have it. I get it. There's some superstar players in the league that have God given gifts, and there's just no answer for them. Players like KD, I got that. But at the same time, you don't want to just sit there and say, okay, if they play a style of ball, we're beat. I don't want that to be the answer. I want to say, okay, look, I got guys out there that are high IQ. They can read the floor of the game and they can adjust. Or we can call a timeout and sub in some guys and win the game like that. Or there might be a series where I say, okay, I know how these guys play. We can swap. We're not going to play you and you. You and you are going to play more this series because we're going to need you against them. And so that's important for your team. And I encourage, even if you're not a Pels fan, you're just a basketball fan, watch your team operate this year and look and start seeing, if you start seeing losses and a lot of losses pile up, start looking at what some of those teams have in common and what they do. Because 9 times out of 10, it tells you where you're weak and it tells you what you need. It may not be that your style of ball necessarily is the bad thing. It just means that there's a counter to it, and you need a player or players that can help offset that counter while still allowing you to execute your game plan. So if that's just all I wanted to say, if you're gonna build your team, or if I was gonna build a team, or how I want my teams built, I just to reiterate, want my team to be able to win games without the superstar players. That means they need to have a system that even the superstar player is playing into. Number one. And number two, we need versatility. We need to be able to adjust to whatever the team is doing. If we cannot adjust, we cannot get an advantage in the game, and it's going to cost us W's. If you're a Pels fan, we saw this all last year when we had to go small ball, and all we had was BI. It was mainly BI Melly were the only two really forwards that we had all year, and we had to put Josh Hart or JJ Redick there at times, or they would play Lonzo defending the three to compensate, which took away some of his advantages from his genetics. And we had other lineups where it was just we just had to play 4 or 5 guards. So roster construction. Even if you're not a Pels or Mavs fan, look at your team. Look and see what it looks like going out there on the court, for the season. Look and start seeing how teams are building their rosters and be like, okay, how do we match up? Where's our advantages? What are our players' best options? You can start to pick out certain things, and you can start to see where that'd be an issue going forward. And then you won't be surprised when you see certain GMs and stuff make certain moves if they're smart. Some GMs fuck up shit. We ain't gonna get into that. But the main thing is you need to be able, as if you're gonna, properly assess this game, you have to be able to pick out and pinpoint where your team's weaknesses are and figure out do you have the tools necessary, the players necessary to go out there and offset that. If not, you're not going to win many games. Shout outs to Gregg Popovich. I mean, Greg can pop a bitch, but Gregg Popovich and the Spurs, because even though they played their style of ball, they adjusted. He adjusted to everything he had. There wasn't a look you could give Pop that he didn't have a defense for, because he built his roster to be versatile and play in various different ways. That's amazing basketball from amazing coach, amazing team. in franchise. So it's your boy. Peace.